Welcome to the Tyler Dickerhoof Show with me, your host, Tyler Dickerhoof. On today's episode, I'm joined by Erika Alessandrini. Erika is a coach, facilitator, author of the new book, Maybe It's Me, Looking Inward to Create Real Change Through Conscious Choices. She has over 23 years in executive leadership and 10,000 hours of coaching. She is, as we just discussed, I would say, a fair-minded Buckeye fan living in the dark territories of the place up north. We can get into that conversation, and hopefully my friend Robbie Emery laughs at that one. But before we get farther, Erika, I want to say this. You and I talked about kind of the similar experiences we've had and the similar problems, I would say, reading your book that we've shared. And so if we're right now talking to someone who's listening and they're exhausted, they're sick and tired of just, why is it always like this? Why does it have to be this hard? Why do I always find myself kind of hitting that wall, low on confidence? They're frustrated. What's actually happening to them?
I would say they've fallen asleep to a number of things, maybe. They mean well. Most people who are in the place that you just described mean well. They have big hearts. They have a lot of talent. They're capable. And they're not realizing that the weight they carry, much of it is optional. They're not challenging and maybe even rejecting some of their thoughts. You know, we don't realize that we don't have to believe everything we think. And we're the creators, right? We tell our stuff. Lots of us are really great storytellers. And we believe everything we think, right? We're very compelling, convincing storytellers. And we tell ourselves that this is how it's done. And this is what we need to do. And it worked before. And if a little bit worked, a lot of it will work better. And, you know, there's so many things that we tell ourselves that keep us in that chronically overcommitted, overfunctioning, undersatisfied state.
What do you think what have you discovered is the real driver to that?
There's a few. I think we're all motivated a little bit differently. Our motivation for doing more and being more and having more is a little different, but there are a few things that I think high performers do have in common. And one, right, like if I go to write the book, there are 5 things I think we have in common, 5 beliefs that we share. So the common thread is believing a set of things that perpetuates the problem.
The beliefs that drive our thoughts, which I kind of adhere to, that drive our thoughts, our actions, our results. I believe that makes up our mindset. And what I hear from you is we start to accept this mindset of this is just the way it is.
Yes. We don't challenge it.
Yeah.
We're not taught to challenge it. We're not taught a lot of things early on that would be really, really helpful to learn in junior high instead of, when we're burning out of corporate in our 50s or 60s or 40s.
Take me back and take us back, myself and the listener, to a place where, either origin for you or where you started to understand that, to your title, maybe it's me.
Yeah. So the signals, right, they're there. There's so many signals if we're willing to see them. And I wasn't. The signals get louder until we do something about them. So for me, I think the moment, it was a collection of moments. I think there was the loud signal that could no longer be ignored that I wrote about in the book. And the loud signal was some 360-degree feedback. That was a little unflattering and maybe a lot hard to digest, but was spot on. Do I have to filter myself on your show?
No.
Or can I say it verbatim? Okay.
Be you. I mean, I contend that when I did mine, and my wife would say this, you're an asshole. So I wish there was a better way to describe it. And, there's some of those that, that's what it is. I can dress it, I'd call it real nice a-hole, but okay, so.
Okay, yeah. So it was that. If I verbatim, it was, she's a bitch. She thinks she's VP of the world.
Yeah.
Right. But it was really interesting. As you know, we migrate towards the negative because that's the stuff that hurts. So there was, when I was asked, invited, and told to do this, I don't think anyone looks forward to a 360-degree feedback. I threw the net far and wide. I was like, let's do it. We're going to do this. Let's do it. Let's get all the voices in here. And they color coded the responses. So I could kind of see. And my people, the ones who knew me, the ones I'd worked with for years, decades, right? It was so flattering. She walked through fire for us. We've got her, just super flattering. And then it was like the other group was talking about somebody completely different. That was the unflattering stuff that I just mentioned that I'd rather not repeat. But it was sobering, and I was angry, and it felt unfair. And I started to chalk it up to this is a bogus process, and haters are going to be haters. And why do we let people hate in private in this anonymous way? If they have something to say, they should say it to just a typical response to being hurt.
It's funny, a 360 review kind of probably, I don't want to say was a piece in part, but really impacted and affected me as well. And one of the things with that is kind of to you, I got that it's all about you. I was like, but it's not. Like, I don't have these specific goals that I'm just hard charging for. That it's just like I drive. I do the work and the expectations. So much of that process, and why I describe it as my wife would say, I was an a-hole. I'm like, I didn't know it. I didn't think I was. And I think I kind of, relate to you as well. It's like the people that I thought appreciated, knew me well, they know my intentions, right? And they've understood that my intentions, actions, but yet those others that don't realize that, why can't they get it?
Felt very misunderstood.
Yeah.
Right. If they couldn't possibly know me, or something in their perception is off, right? It was them, not me. And there really wasn't anything at that moment you could tell me that made me believe it, that had me believing it was me yet. As a matter of fact, I think at this particular point, I was never so sure it wasn't me, because I kept pointing to the scoreboard, right? I kept pointing to the countless hours, the work, the input, the effort, the results that I had been creating. And wasn't that the point? Aren't we all on the same team? Don't we all want this? So as it turns out, not that way, right? We don't want results if and I felt like I really did care deeply, right? But if loving on me or me loving on you felt like loving on sandpaper because I was an asshole when I wasn't getting my way, it wasn't all the time. I think that's why they gave me a little bit of grace. But man, when the pressure was on, look out.
Oh yeah.
I'm going to slay every dragon in front of me.
Yeah. Do you know your Enneagram?
Yeah.
Are you familiar
I'm
with
a
Enneagram?
one.
You're a one.
Mm-hmm. I'm a one with,
surprising.
I'm like 1 point. I thought it was an 8 forever.
Yeah.
And then I did the work and did some certification, and I was like, ooh, I'm a 1. So I thought I was an 8. I'm like 1 point different. But when, someone said to me, Erika, when you read the description, right, read them both, and the one that makes you kind of throw up in your mouth a little, that's probably the one that's really you. That was the one. So,
okay.
Yeah.
I'm an 8. And it's interesting because much the same, kind of feedback and as we just shared. But here's what I want to know a little bit deeper. You said begrudgingly voluntold to do the 360 review. What led to that moment?
Gosh, I don't know how many bridges I had burned and people I had upset, and I was a results at all cost. And I really felt like I was right? I knew better. I could do better. Just let me show you. There's a better way. It doesn't have to be like this. Just awful, quite frankly. But not mean-spirited.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever been mean, but inflexible and rigid and righteous to no end.
After you go through the 360 review and you have the moment, you realize, oh, okay, maybe that's me. I want to ask you this, and hopefully you've gone back. You mentioned a little bit, as I mentioned, teenage years, the challenges there. But where do you think that operational mode, what do you think it was really stemming from?
For sure, childhood, imposter syndrome. Growing up poor, alcoholic father. Did anyone I know drive by the house and find my dad's car parked sideways in the driveway halfway into the lawn last night? Does anyone know that it was my dad who fell asleep at the railroad tracks, or his car that went through the front of the convenience store? We were there was that. We were a blended family. My mom had been previously married. I had half brother and sister. And that in the 70s, not many people had that. Today, that nobody would bat an eyelash. But back then, that wasn't normal. And our family didn't feel normal to me. I wouldn't have language for it when I was young, but I felt the judgment. You could feel the judgment from like friends, parents, like, well, they were hesitant about things, but it's probably because Generation X, we weren't supervised. I had older brothers and sisters, and my sister would put me in the car, and we would drive through the neighborhood. So she was old enough to drive and had I don't know, it was her Nova or something cool, right? She'd put me on her lap and I would steer and she'd do the pedals, and I was, I don't know, 7, 8, 9. And one day we did that with my friend in the car with us, and we're like, let's drive by her house. You can imagine, right? So there was just things about my family that weren't true in other families. Yeah. And so what I learned young was, if you do well, if you perform well, if you can not give anybody a reason to look behind the curtain, they won't know there's dysfunction. It will look like we're a perfectly normal family. I think that's it in a nutshell, is just trying to appear as normal as possible. And when you do well, people don't look.
You get really good at hiding. Not that you're so much like hiding, but it just becomes who you are to reach that performance, to accomplish those things, to find that validation and acceptance. And I imagine as you've gone through the work, you've helped so many of the leaders. You and I, as we're talking for the first time ever and can relate on all of this, we're not alone. There's a lot of people that have gone through what you've gone through, what I've gone through. And so as you wrote this book, as you work with those people, how do you help them discover what you discovered?
So I think my job as a coach typically is to be that mirror, to hold up the mirror in the most truthful, right? You get me, you get honesty, you get candor, but really in the I got you, like I got you because I get you. I am you, right? I've been there, and I think coaching isn't about telling your own story, but I think it is part of the relationship development as you start to work really intimately with somebody, and all of their things are just going to be highlighted. They're going to be on display. The things that people have spent their life hiding, the things they don't want anybody else to know, everything comes out in a coaching session. And I mean, if you're good, if people trust you, and one of the ways you build trust is to not hide your own stuff from others.
How do you think that relates and correlates to leadership?
I think it's a big trust builder. I think we look up to leaders who I think that's the shift, right? Maybe this is the one you made, but I think that's what people might look up to you or respect you, maybe fear you a little, I don't know. But there's a way that they see you when you're good or great or whatever. And then there's a way they see you when you let them see all of you. And one of them they'll admire and work with, and it's more superficial or transactional. And the other, they will, I think tolerate is definitely a word I would use. They'll give you some grace and they'll tolerate you for a while. But when you show people who you really are, that's when people actually will follow you, not just learn from you, use you, which is the other side of it.
Yeah.
You're only as good as what you can do for people in the first situation, right? Here, you bring value in different ways.
So, kind of this arc in this journey of unpacking your childhood, teenage years into this performance professionally, kind of that guarded performance at all costs. You have essentially what I call a window shattering moment is what I call it. I've had those. You said, earlier that like, I didn't really believe it. I thought they were just, had something out for me. When did you understand, I got to deal with this?
I think this is two-part. I think I immediately knew I needed to deal with it because I am a highly responsible person. I am always going to own my shit, always. That's the one, right? I'm going to do the right thing. I'm the good girl. Like, I'm going to do the right thing. But I think even though I knew I had to deal with it, and I sincerely was approaching it, there was still a good piece of me that didn't yet believe it. I still thought, well, the truth will come out. They'll see me differently. Like I knew I needed to do some things different, and I was willing to do that, but I still didn't know it was me. Okay. I think it wasn't until fast forward, leave corporate, get into this work. I'm my first client. I've got some real work to do. I know it. I'm doing it. But high performers who work under pressure, one of the patterns, right, that I'm always looking for, this is how I know they're my people. is high pressure. They know they need to do something different. They change course. They correct course. They only do enough to relieve the pressure. As soon as it feels a little bit better, back to normal, right? And so that was one of my patterns, is just do enough to take off that unrelenting heaviness or something that didn't feel good. And that was back to business, back to what I know how to do. And so there was a moment I didn't write about in the book. I talked a lot or wrote a lot about my son and that relationship, but he was in a car accident 4 days after he got his car and his driver's license. Totaled the car. He walked away okay. But I'm a divorced parent. I do talk about that in the book. I had a practice marriage that produced my incredible child. And it was then that I realized I was still on the surface. Like, I had let down some of the walls around my heart, but there's part of the pattern is we get really good at surface level, doing the right things, saying the right things, very self-managed, self-control, but it's not deep. There's still something missing from that. And I think that was what came to light through that experience. That was a very, that will burn through all of the excuses and all of the surface level approach that I had to things in certain relationships. I think some things were definitely, things were getting better, but this is where I really surfaced that if I want things to be better, like, you change the world by changing yourself. Like, I knew that I wasn't doing the real honest, deep work in certain places. And I didn't, because when you admit that, you have to own things. You have to own your own suffering. You have to own that you've created suffering for others. You have to own things that nobody wants to own. And I think that was the bigger, deeper reckoning for me. Why? Say a little bit more.
Why was it the deeper reckoning? What did it really expose?
That was me. It exposed that you get out of something what you put into it. And when you're only putting in that surface level, right? So if I get a little more specific, and I think the example will resonate, because even though we're probably a crowd of leaders here, we're all humans at heart. Many of us are married and lots of us have been divorced, right? So if you're a divorced parent out there, I think you're going to be able to really relate to this. I thought I was doing all of the right things in the relationship, like with my ex and his wife, and managing co-parenting and that sort of thing. And through that activity or around the accident, I was still in control mode. I was squarely in control mode, which is the bigger problem with most of us, because when the pressure's on, right, what I'm really passionate about helping people see is most of us love pressure if we're high performers, and we will weirdly say that it actually makes us better, and that sort of thing. But pressure arises, right? We live in a very demanding environment if we're leaders and business owners, and that produces fear. And we don't see it as fear. We don't know how to spot fear. We don't know what to do with fear. And fear, right, is going to creep in biggest when something that matters to you most is at risk. And nothing matters to you more than your family and your children. And so in that environment, I was still trying to control things, because pressure comes in, fear takes over, fear dresses up to look like responsibility and caring. And so we don't see it because those things look noble and good and virtuous even.
Just a quick pause. If this conversation is hitting something, don't let it end when this episode does. My weekly newsletter goes deeper. One story, one truth, one thing to face. It's free to do so by clicking on the link in the show notes. Now back to the show.
And so I'm running around being responsible and caring, but still squarely in control, right? And control can go across the spectrum. On one end, it could look like force and that. And, somewhere in the middle, it looks like manipulation, which is where I squarely lived most of the time. And then at the other end, it looks like caring. It's control wrapped in a big hug. Right? Yeah. But we're still trying to grasp for control because it's the only thing that gives us the security that we crave. And so in that moment, that was on fire. And I saw what I was doing.
The control in those moments, it gives us the ability to navigate our fears and insecurities on our terms.
Yes.
So what changed?
I just dropped the that need to control. I think, I talk a lot about sharing power. And that was really hard for me to do when it came to, with anything that really, really matters, whether it's your career, your kids, maybe something you're in charge of. It could be a bottom line, it doesn't matter, something that you're in charge of or something that really matters to you, it's hard to share power, right? And you can't share control. Control can't be shared. Power can. And when we don't want to allow others to own their part, and we take it away in lots of different ways, by over-functioning, by manipulating, by just taking control of things that we don't want others to be in charge of. So like in the parenting example, it's, and I think prior to that, I would have said I was the poster child for divorce parenting. I was, maybe by the only standard I knew then or was aware of then, but not really. I still wanted to control everything. And I think when you let go and you share power and you let people you partner with them, everyone's better. Everyone is better off. And the results are usually better. And I don't think it's until you at least try it and experiment with it, I don't think you want to believe that.
So I'm going to share this for our conversation. This is just you and me, and maybe people listening and have heard this before. You write in the book about when your dad died at 14, right? And that impacted you. Obviously, you wrote about it. I had someone in my life die when I was 14 as well. I had a younger brother die in a farming accident. I drove over him. He was 3. And the impact that you talk about, this hiding, this, as I describe it, I'm going to put on this facade. I have to prove myself. What I realized in my late 30s after doing a 360 review is that drive to be intense had origins in that day. Because that's how I dealt with it. I just put my head down and pushed. And that got me through. And not having, always fighting that being accepted, being a farm kid in a world that did not admire farm kids. Even though I grew up in a rural community, it wasn't widely accepted. And so it's like, how do I prove myself? And it often was just put my head down and push, which created loneliness, right? And one of the things that I found through this process, as you share about, your dad, you share about your divorce, you share about your son, is what I found in being able to share that story with people and understanding how I responded to it and how that showed it in my leadership and caused all sorts of relationship problems, not only in leadership, but my family, everywhere else, is, it isn't that's what caused it, but that's what I found out, that's how I could survive. And I think as you point to this idea of control, and so many people, they will find a moment and say, if I control it, then it's on my terms. Then the results are, if it's on my control, then I'm not at someone else's whim. Right? And then I can hopefully get the validation, the accolades. The way for me to survive is by control, or for me is just put my head down and push, and it will just be on me. But when it's not, then I'll just, I'll avoid rejection. And it's called what I call inactivity. So there's intensity and inactivity. I'll just choose not to engage, because then I'm not hurt, because I really didn't try. And, as you share on terms. Absolutely, right? And as I mentioned when we first started chatting and got to know each other, and now a half hour ago, it's like, yeah, there's a lot of similarities here. And as you share, and I feel compelled to share, so you feel more comfortable in this case, right? And hopefully you do. And me sharing that vulnerability is not only expressing what I read and hear from you and saying, yes, I get it, but I know we're two people from completely different walks of life that have two sides of the same coin. And I'm not remiss to whoever's listening right now is going through maybe, a similar thing. And as I think about the work that I do in this podcast, book coaching, is to help people get through that, because they can, much like what I hear from you is like, yeah, I had to get through it. It sucked. It was hard. It didn't make my relationships fun. But once I did, it's like, wow, this is a whole lot different.
Thank you for sharing that. I do appreciate it. What's interesting about what you just said is, when we're in that mode, before we wake up to how our way, is impacting other people, right? I talk in the book about, like, God bless the assholes of the world, right? Like, because the world needs people like us, but they need us
healthy,
to do things a little bit different. Yeah, they need us to be a healthier version of ourselves, right? And at least I, maybe, and you could tell me if this is true for you. What I didn't realize was, in that mode, driving for results, doing all the things, I had okay relationships. I wouldn't say my relationships felt off or bad, but I also didn't know what to look for. I did not know what to look for. And as you ascend, right, as you ascend in your career and you go, every coach, every person you probably have in your podcast probably refers to, what gets you here won't get you there. So there's a version of that, but I firmly believe that you show me the quality of your relationships and I will show you the quality of your life. And when you are a control enthusiast and you're kind of an asshole, you're doing damage in all of your relationships. And when you're out there slaying dragons like I was, like maybe you were, and you come home at the end of a day and give the people you love most in the world what's left over, what's left of you instead of the best, right? That is going to erode the relationships over time. Influence, which is what we all need as leaders. So if we're trying to be better leaders at home or at work, we need to be able to influence things. Influence is 100% dependent on the quality of your relationships. And your relationships are dependent, right? Like you're half of every relationship you're in. So if you don't do the work of having a strong, healthy self or having some self-mastery, your relationships are at risk. And then your quality of life is at risk. So I do believe that everything centers on those relationships. And if you don't know how to watch for the signals that are telling you your relationships are at risk, like when your reputation's at risk and you can brush it off, or maybe you miss something on the scorecard and you can brush it off. You can't brush off relationship damage. It's going to catch up with you and you're going to pay a price, one that you may not be ready, maybe one, it's going to come calling and it may be too late.
How do you, for those that, and again, I would contend that most people that are acting in that way, that I would say like the unhealthy version of me, maybe the unhealthy version of you, right? When I was in that place, I knew that I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know that the way I was showing up was negatively impacting the relationships. I just knew there was something. I just didn't know what it was. It was like I could tell there was something, yet had friends, easy to make friends, do those things. But it was just always, there always felt that tension, like it was harder than it needed to be. I don't know if you relate to that or if that's similar. And for maybe someone that is listening to this and just getting clued in, how do you help people recognize that, oh, you got problems, like you got relationship problems, even though you don't think you do?
So I think, right, when we talk about in this work, self-awareness is a big part of it, right? As a fellow coach, And so when we talk in terms of self-awareness, and I will ask people, how self-aware do you think you are? And they go, oh, I think I'm really self-aware. I'm like, oh, well, tell me more. How do you know? What is the evidence? And then, but then I'll follow it up with, tell me the last time you asked for some feedback. They're like, huh? What? Come again? And it's like, well, when's the last time you asked for some feedback?
Well, I get my annual review. Yeah. I'm
right.
open. I run an open meeting. People can say whatever they want.
Exactly. But none of them are really saying, hey, I'm trying to be better at this or that. Can you give me some specific feedback? Or, I'd love to know how it feels to be around me. I know, because, high performers, a lot of us can be very intense. And that level of intensity can be off-putting, intimidating. It can be a lot of things. And if we don't know how to really solicit feedback that's going to be meaningful, that we can incorporate and do something with, we're not self-aware, because that's the gap, right? If how people are experiencing you and how you think people are experiencing you are not the same thing. So I think my questions will lead them to that place without saying that directly.
Yeah. I mean, I think you get to a point where, as I frame it, the mirror's a liar. You look in the mirror, and if you and I look in the mirror, and it's the mirror in our bathroom, and we used to see ourselves, and that's what we look like, but then we take a picture of ourselves, like a selfie, and then we look at the actual result of it, and we're like, that's not me, but like, that's what everyone else sees. The only person that ever sees the mirror is you. Everyone else sees what the reflection of the mirror is, what's on the other side of the camera. And to me, that's where it's like, I would say my coach, my friend, mentor, John Maxwell expressed, no one's capable of self-awareness. It's just incapable, because we can't see what others see. The only way to gain a perspective is say, Erika, hey, what do you see? And be honest and truthful and genuine about it. But that also means going back to, like, as you shared about your 360 review myself, is like, oh, I got to own whatever they say. I don't have to agree with it, but I have to own it.
And what I also hear from my clients who are like us is that they'll get feedback even if they ask for it. If the relationship, if people don't feel safe with you, they're not going to tell you what you need to hear. So you may, another side of it, you may be asking for it and just not getting it because of how you receive it or because of what you do with it. Or if you're somebody who excuses it or explains it away or, oh, you must not understand, then people stop telling you. Or if you don't do anything with it, people will stop telling you.
I had a conversation with a friend yesterday, and we were talking about the book Good to Great, right? And I think you've obviously Jim Collins' book, and it's great in a lot of elements. But as I've seen it play out in the people that I work with now, and I'm curious to see your perspective, is I think a lot of organizations that embrace the good to great model and the hedgehog and all the things, it gave a lot of license to people to be a-holes. Whether you call it radical candor from, which is a different book, but if you call that, it's just kind of like, we have this challenge mindset. We're going to, the ruthless pursuit. Ruthless is kind of intense. Ruthless doesn't have a lot of empathy. Ruthless doesn't have a lot of compassion. And I see this. I've worked with companies and they have that persona. And they'll almost choose to say, yeah, we're okay with chewing people up and spitting them out, because that's what it takes to be great. And yet I would really contend, and this is where interesting, just like I said, came up yesterday. So it's kind of, as we're talking about this, but I think if you looked at those 11 companies, I don't think that's how the leaders were, because that's not how they were revered.
It's one version of great, right? Not my version of great. Up to somebody that probably is great. And those are the people who aren't for this work. They're not for this work or ready for this work, and no judgment. But and I think that just kind of hit something for me. That was the moment I walked away, right? So just kind of going back, college dropout, primary income earner in my family. My son was a sophomore in high school back then, and I am ready to walk away from my career because, and this is what I think the 360 in the early work did for me, is I was able to look at the environment I was in and no longer label it wrong or the people in it bad, right? I mean, I would even say things like the evil empire, when I would refer to headquarters. And when I could release that judgment and go, okay, it's okay for them to think that's the right way or a good way or great, but it's not my great. And I don't think I'd ever given myself permission to have my own definition of great or success or winning or anything else. And I think I hadn't had a minute of leadership training my entire career, not one. Didn't have a playbook for these moments, mergers, acquisitions, integrations. We didn't have any training for these things. And I think that's what, I'm on a mission to make peace possible. When I could make peace with, they can find great their way. And my choice is to stay there or go find great in a different way that works for me, rather than judging their values and their way. And, I'm not going to trash private equity or anything but it's just different.
Yeah.
Not right or wrong, but it wasn't for me. But I didn't even know me. Right? I talk in the book about, I'm like, oh, they don't know me. They don't know me. I didn't know me. Right?
Yeah.
So that was some of that early work. And it's okay if that's great for you. But if it's not, I can help you. That's where I would sit with that.
I love that distinction. And the reality is, it may be, but it may not be. And I would contend, as you shared earlier, and there's some of those affected me, is when that environment is costing you the relationships that really matter, because that's how you operate. Or as you said earlier, you come home and you're spent. Your emotional level of being able to be a good mom, to be a good spouse, to do any of those things is gone. Then I'd really contend that that's not a place that is serving you to be the best version of you.
Yeah, and I think that's where I would invite people to start. Is it's okay to have the scoreboard sitting there, right? That's one measure. I bet the scoreboard looks pretty good if you're a high performer. But sitting next to it has to be an honest satisfaction score, right? What does it feel like to be inside your life in all the ways? Not just in the not on the Instagram reel, but across your life, your relationships, everything, right? What does it feel like to be in your life? That gap, right? That's the data that we can work with. Like, if we can see that, then there's hope, because we will justify one for the other for a long time, right? So, and I'm sure these probably crosswalk into some of your walls, but where I sat, if I use my own terminology, was at the intersection of the justification pattern, right, and the postponement pattern. And together, they're wickedly dangerous, because one gives you the story that you can hide behind, and the other one gives you runway. And you can stay in that place for a really long time using one to justify the other, right? And it usually takes a friend, a coach, or losing something big to see it. And I think that's the work for people like us, is how can we hold up that mirror sooner? You don't have to lose your job, your marriage, your mind, your money, your kids to get there.
Yeah. Well, and I think, part of that is hearing from you. What's life like now? What are your friends? What are your, those peers? What do they say about Erika now?
It's interesting. I did leave my industry. Yeah. Have to, but I think that was a very conscious choice, right? I couldn't stay there and be, it wasn't my environment. I didn't belong. I could fit in, but I didn't belong. So reinventing yourself is a little bit easier outside of the place that you were the asshole. So that worked in my favor. They didn't know.
Yes, I've done the same. Yes.
Okay. So I had that working for me. But I think you have to find where you do belong and where you can do your best work. And you have to know what winning for you looks like. And I want to do meaningful work with really cool people. I want to do stuff that matters. I want to make a difference, right? And mainly, I just want to bring more peace. And most people don't know they're looking for peace, Tyler. They're looking for relief. And I'll take you at that. And then I want to help crosswalk you into why peace is the better option. And I think most people reject it initially because it probably feels soft, like it would come at the expense of results or performance. But I would argue that peace and performance can coexist, and one actually amplifies the other. So that's the work right there. That's what lights me up.
When you think about your son, and you think about him getting older and going through his professional journey, what's something you hope to impress upon him by the book that you wrote, the work that you do?
Well, I would hope that he could learn as much from me as I've learned from him, first of all. It's interesting because he is starting his professional career. He did graduate college and went off and started a business. Who knew he would be an entrepreneur? And watching him navigate entrepreneurship, which is just, talk about swinging for the fence at 26, right? Like, let's go start a business. And I feel like the work we did together is coming through in the way he navigates life and challenges. And he's getting married next year. He just got engaged. And, watching this, the early stages of starting a business and the ups and downs, and his ability, his emotional intelligence at 26 years old is, I'm envious of it, like to have that when I was his age. So it makes me extraordinarily proud. But he is his own person. Again, I think I'm still learning more from him than he's learning from me.
One of the things that I have gathered, so my kids are a little bit younger. They're 19, 18, and 16. And as I share, my friends and I, you learn a lot more about leadership if you really look at it and apply it with your kids than you probably do in most career instances. Especially if you want to do it well, right? The ability to take ownership, to apologize, the humility, the vulnerability of it. Yeah, I have no idea. I've never been a parent of a 19-year-old. You've never been a parent of a 26-year-old, right? You're just figuring it out. And I think if you model that as leaders, often you talk about the imposter syndrome. And luckily I've had conversations with people. And it's like, to me, that's more an indictment on the leader than it is the person. Because if you feel like an imposter, then I haven't done a good job of pouring belief into you and say, no, you are capable, you can do this. But yet people go to it every single day and feel that way. Doesn't mean that you're not right in feeling it. But I think that comes back to the challenge, as kids, and as you say, your son being an entrepreneur and having the courage to do it, attests to the fact of like, yeah, it's okay. Just go, try your best, do whatever that is. And I think as my hope is much the same, that, yeah, my kids can learn from my experiences and be willing to be more authentically vulnerable. And yeah, this is who I am, and not worry about so much other people think that makes them hide, that makes them, control, put on all of the masks, do all those things to be what other people expect them to be.
When I work on these things with leaders, we can make quicker progress. We're far more successful actually in the workplace than they are at home initially. The home stuff, letting their kids be who they are and not try to fix them, save them, control them, rescue them, do things for them is harder work at home. Again, the more someone or something matters to you, the harder it is to loosen your grip. And so that is actually, to your point, the harder.
Yeah. Erika, where can people learn more about you, your book, and your work?
So I spend most of my time, Tyler, with a nonprofit out of Dayton, Ohio, called Aileron. And we exist to serve free enterprise, small business, business owners and their teams. We help them professionally manage their organizations and, among other things like strategy and culture and all of the fun stuff to professionally manage your organization. We have leadership programs, and that's where I spend most of my time. And we've just created a new program called Becoming a Leader at Peace that we're piloting now, that's around the concepts in the book and shepherds people through the concepts, the frameworks, learning to make conscious choices in their life and ultimately getting to that peace that they crave.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for everyone watching, listening today. If that's you, hit the subscribe button. The bell to get notified whenever we drop new content as well. If you could rate and review this episode, that'll help more people just like you find impactful leaders like Erika. Until next time, choose to lead with impact.